lot of story that reminds us of what that process is of going from here through to here. We know that Moses' birth was at a time when, can I put it this way, there were some extreme birth control measures in place. And Hebrew children were not surviving very long. And he was put in a basket, floated down the river, found by a princess, raised in a different culture and community to what he was born in, had this whole thing about what is adoption, what does it look like, how does it work? And if any of you have done anything with people that have been through that sort of stuff, you know that that leaves a mark. And as you grow older, regardless of how great your adopted parents are, there are questions and issues that you work through. There's stuff that you have to go through. And Exodus 2 verse 11 is where we're going to pick it up. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labour. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked one who was in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" And the man said, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me like you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." When Pharaoh heard of it, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where... Before I start talking about that, I just want to get a quick survey. Who's heard more than 5 sermons on this? Who's heard at least a couple of sermons on this topic? Yeah. So this is a very familiar passage to most people here, because it's one of those little things that highlights when we are just stepping into the things God has called us to do, and we're trying to work out, how do I do this? Doesn't always go to plan. So let's just start with the positives. The positives. Moses saw injustice in the world. He saw the problem and went, I should do something about it. And sometimes we treat that as just a minor little thing, but it's important. Because as we've grown up in our lives, we don't always see what's going on around us. We can be so busy with this, that, and everything else that this injustice can be sitting right there. We can walk past it, we can notice it every day, but we never actually see it. And this sense of injustice just sits there and no one takes any notice and just keeps walking. So that positive, that Moses saw the injustice, should be going, big tick, well done. You stopped, you noticed, and you decided you should do something about it. Excellent. Great one, Moses. Well done. He wanted to see change, and he thought, I shouldn't delegate this to somebody else. He probably had no one he could delegate it to. He didn't say, this is something that person should do, or this is something that one. This is something I should do something about. Another big tick. How many people have you noticed in our community that can see things wrong and want to blame somebody else for fixing it? They can do it, or they can do it. Well, Moses took it on himself and said, here's a problem, I can see the problem, and I think I should do something about the problem. Excellent start, isn't it? What you and I know, but Moses didn't, is this was God sitting in his heart, stirring up a bigger picture. Moses would have no idea at that point in time that what God was doing was stirring in his heart a bigger thing that would drive later in his life massive things. But right now he was stirring in his heart that sense of injustice isn't good. Things need to be changed. There needs to be better law and order than this. There needs to be a better structure. And God was stirring that in his heart. And Moses was completely oblivious because he was just focused on this bit. They're the positives. The negatives. Can anyone notice a negative with how Moses handled this situation? Okay. Some people, let's put it this way, could say that he lacked wisdom in his response. He didn't really think through beyond going, is anyone watching? How his response would work. Zeal without wisdom brings forth death. Proverbs 19:2, and don't worry looking for it, Charlotte, it's not there. Desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet miss the way? One of those little proverbs that says, don't rush in, stop, think through the steps you're about to take, consider the options and make sure the options are actually going to achieve long-term what it is you want to do. I used to be part of a particularly aggressive church called the Potter's House, and its way of evangelising was to basically chase people down the street and run up to them and go, hey, do you know Jesus? You should know Jesus, you're going to hell. And then chase down the street to the next person. Do you know Jesus? You should know Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, you'll go to hell. And it was very aggressive. And you know what happened? Most people told them in various colourful ways to keep their opinions to themselves and move on. They had zeal. They had a passion for God. They wanted people to know the truth. But their method of telling people that truth pushed people away. Moses had a zeal for God, a zeal to deal with the injustice, but his method of doing it pushed people away and robbed him of connection and robbed him of opportunity to be able to do more. Romans chapter 10 verse 2. For I can testify about them that they are zealous for God, but their zeal is not based on knowledge. This is Paul talking about, it's not there either, Charlotte. It's talking about the Jews and their passion for defending God's word. Yet their defence of God's word was misdirected because they didn't understand what they were defending. And this is where Moses is at. He's wanting to do something. He's passionately wanting to do something. He wants to make a difference because he can see the situation around him. Yet he just races in without knowledge and understanding and makes the situation worse. And as a result, he ends up being over there in Midian when the problem's here in Egypt because he has to flee for his life. Who can remember when you were younger and you did something that you thought was going to work a certain way and it went pear-shaped? And it didn't quite work the way that you thought and you ended up not quite getting the thing that you wanted to get. Instead, you got something completely different. This is Moses' spot. He has the passion, he wants it to work this way, but it's gone that way. That is the joy of youth, when you have the energy, but you don't have the wisdom. Then along comes in the next section. You get a little bit more wisdom, and you've still got some energy. Exodus chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight. Why does the bush not burn up? When the Lord saw that Moses had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. Let's start back at the early bit. Moses has settled into family life. He's got a wife, he's got kids, he's busy doing the family business, raising the sheep, making sure everybody's fed and happy and all of that sort of stuff. Who can remember, and some of us are still in it and some of us are looking forward to it, that middle phase of life where you're raising kids and you're basically on a treadmill and you're getting stuff for the kids to eat, you're educating the kids, you're getting the kids to sports, you're getting the kids to this, and you get home at night and you just go, Does that sound familiar to anyone? Or is that just me raising kids? All you seem to be doing is working, feeding kids, working, and feeding kids, and working, and just churning through, doing what you've got to do to get through the day. This is what Moses had moved into. There is no inkling anymore of the injustice that he saw in Egypt. That thing that had sparked in his life, that had changed his life, has been put on the midlife treadmill. Can't get to it, not getting to it, not going to get there. And maybe he's got to the place where he's just thought, oh, what can I do about it? You know, the problem's just too big for me. Maybe I should just leave it in Egypt and just get on with this. I can't do anything. What's the point? You know, it's all hard. Maybe it's just, I'm too busy. I heard the word too busy a lot. I'm often too busy, but I make time for the things that are important. See, life can be busy. Life can have issues. Life can question, do you have the commitment to do this? Do you have the time to do this? I don't know exactly what happened for Moses. Maybe it was just, I can't go back there. It's too much of an issue. But whatever happened, he had settled into family life. And this had taken quite a period of time. We're talking 40 years over this, where he has just settled. But you know, in that period of time when there's stuff competing, you have this thing called a choice. And you get to choose the thing that is important. And it doesn't matter where we are in life, we do that. We choose what are the things that I'm actually going to prioritise and put in my life, and what are the things that I'm going to allow to just be the treadmill. And every now and again, it is good to step back and just look at the treadmill and go, am I actually spending my time and my energy on the things that matter? Or am I allowing life to dictate that? And I'm just going around and around doing the same stuff. What tends to happen for Christians is that God intervenes when the treadmill's in full flight. And what God tends to do when that treadmill's in full flight and you're just going round and round and round and round and round and round and round is he puts a stick in it. And have you ever seen what happens to a treadmill when you put a stick in it? It stops. All of a sudden. And he has so many little subtle ways of just stopping the treadmill for a moment and getting us to step back and to reflect and ask, am I doing what is right by just running on this treadmill? little mini crisis, little mini questions, little mini things that God just puts in there and goes, stop, reflect, consider, and choose. For Moses, this comes in the form of a bush that is fully alight, but not burning. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I would run towards a bush that was fully alight, but not burning. I'm probably more the sort of person that would go, I'm going in the other direction. No. The first choice Moses makes is he goes towards the bush and says, I want to investigate this further. On the treadmill, running, do you really want to look? Here's the invite, and God calls, come. Let's have a little chat about this, shall we? Moses wanders up. Moses, yes, here I am. Take off your shoes. This is holy ground. Now, at this point, Moses has a choice. Another decision to make. Am I willing to take off the shoes? Am I willing to let go of something that is essential for my work as a shepherd, shoes, and trust God? See, sometimes we miss what is being portrayed here. God isn't asking him any little random thing. If he takes those shoes off, how much hot sand are you going to walk on? Not a lot. You're going to be stationary. Moses, are you going to step into this or stay where it's safe? Are you going to make yourself vulnerable and trust God? Or are you going to go over here and play it safe? And Moses has a very real choice with very real long-term consequences that he knows nothing about happening right at this moment. Because we know where Moses' story goes, don't we? We know that if he chose right now not to take off the sandals, but instead to say, yeah, not for me, we know what wouldn't have happened. But these are the choices that happen in the busyness of our life, where God comes along and calls to us and says, make a decision for me, surrender this little part of your life and trust me with this. And we choose either to step in or we choose no. And on the basis of those choices, God responds to us and says, now, okay, you've decided to step in. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And at this, Moses hit his face. Step in, what happens? God gives him a revelation of who he is. I am the God of your father. Oh. What's happening right here? Moses is being reflected back to his childhood, to those Hebrews that were in slavery, that loved him and cared for him, that he had tried to help, but they then rejected him. He's been reflected back there and says, I am the God who called. I'm the one who put that sense in you. I am the one who has made you into this image. I am the one who has picked you up and made you a man. Moses, I am. And Moses' response? Who's ever felt a sense of shame or guilt when God has held up a mirror or a lofty ambition that you once proclaimed and hadn't quite met. It says, remember? Moses hides. And then God says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. He takes him back to that little spark that was back here and says, I've seen it, and guess what? I'm going to send you to go do something about it. Oh, awesome. See, God doesn't show us these things to rub it in our face. He shows us these things and says, now, let's go and do something. Come on. You might have thought that it's too late. You might have thought by now that you've wasted all of this time and you can't do it. I just go, you've spent all that time doing that, and I'm going to use those learnings to go on over here. I will take what you have learnt in that and I will use it over here. There is no wasted time with God. He redeems the time. He makes it worthwhile. He uses all of those things that we think were, I did that wrong and I did that wrong. And later on down here, when the crunch comes, he reminds us of a lesson from that and a lesson from that and a bit from there. And we just go, I can make better decisions now. And we know where this story goes. Moses objects and says, I can't do it. You know, I tried. He didn't use those words. He just says, but I don't have the voice. I don't have the words. I don't have the... And God just says, mate, we're going. Here's your brother Aaron. He'll talk for you. Stop the excuses. Let's go. And sometimes we need that blunt, direct, stop thinking you can't and stop realising who God is, who wants to work with you. It's not your power going to Egypt to free the Jews. It is you and me. And you're just the mouthpiece. God's the one with the power. God's the one with the strength. And he will do the delivering. He just wants us to know our place and be willing to step. Oh, but Moses goes, and we know what happens. Egypt gets turned upside down, and a new nation is born because Moses goes back to the call that God had placed in his life as a youth that he didn't understand, but now later in life he gets. And instead of going in his own strength, Moses goes in the strength of God and relies on God. Exodus 18. Let's skip forward a little bit further. The next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people. And they stood around him from the morning till the evening. When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone as judge while these people stand around you from morning till evening?" Moses answered him, "Because the people come to me to seek God's will. Wherever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions." Moses' father-in-law replied, "What you're doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone." One of the issues that comes along with a degree of success is that people see you as this great, wonderful person who has all the answers to everything in life and start asking you for advice. And that can be intoxicating. Because the minute people start asking you for advice, you start to think that perhaps you know something. And one of the great dangers of that is that we usually don't. But we think we do. And we start giving out all sorts of brilliant advice and wisdom and understanding that, well, it's marginally helpful. Who's ever seen a self-help show and gone, yeah, that's marginally helpful at best, and largely a waste of time and effort? Moses had gone from, I'm going to change the world, to a place where all he was doing day after day was sitting there settling arguments. The vision, the passion that God had put in him had been boiled down to give them the goat. No, they shouldn't have stolen that, put it back. That sort of day-to-day, mundane dealing with stuff, and the passion had been buried, and the thing God had really called him to do was no longer what he was doing. And sometimes it takes an in-law to be blunt. Who's ever met an in-law that was blunt? In-laws can do that. And they say things. And Jethro comes along and goes, what you're doing is not good. You have just got caught up in this position. It's distracting you from what you're actually called to do. And instead of doing the thing that God has put in your heart, you're just running with this. And yes, this is important. Yes, this is valuable. Yes, everybody is looking at it and going, good Moses, we love your judgments. We love that. Stay there, keep doing that. That's good. But it's not what God has for him. Because what did God actually have for him at this point in his life? Things like getting 10 commandments and setting the laws and building a nation and developing a culture. Are those things important? Yeah. Is he going to do any of those things while he's sitting here listening to domestic disputes and settling, she said this. No, I didn't say it. I said it like this. He's not going to get any of that done while he's doing this. And this is one of the problems that you and I face continually through our lives. Important things consume our time and effort, but they're not the most important thing. We get so caught up in doing this stuff. That's good, it's important, it matters. But it's not the thing that sits here that is the most important stuff that God has put upon us that only we can do. Because it was only Moses that could go up and get those 10 commandments. It was only Moses that could go and set the culture for the entire camp. That was Moses' job, not theirs. But think of it from Moses' perspective. He's got to a place where he's feeling very valued. Because there's nothing like sitting in the middle and being able to be the person that everyone comes to for advice and, I feel really special. I feel really important. It's awesome. My ego is being stroked daily because everybody's telling me that I'm giving them great advice and helping out and solving all the problems. It's awesome. And then Jethro says, it's not good, give it up. But if I give that up, what do I do now? Have you ever been in that spot where God's sort of gently prodded and said, it's time to let that thing go and do this? And that is often a challenge that we face in the latter years of our life. And often that letting go comes about because we only have energy for this and this, and we want to do this, this and that. And God starts asking us the questions about now, which are the bits that you're going to hang on to and which are the bits you're going to keep going with? And it's that challenge of, I need to let go of the things that other people can do. And you want to know something that's really challenging about giving something to somebody else to do? They will do it differently. And isn't that frustrating? I'm reminded of a story of a young lady who wanted to cook something for their mother. And they wanted to cook their mother's recipe. And the rest of the family were coming around and they all ate it and they went, it's not the same. It's close, it's not the same. What did you miss out? What did you do? Because even when we model ourselves on somebody else for a long period of time, as this daughter would have done with her mum, it's not the same. And then we have this choice. Well, what do we do when it's not the same? Do we support the difference? Do we come along and go, hey, that was an interesting meal? Do we say, thank you, that was great? It was different. How do we respond when it's like that? Because who knows, none of us can stay on forever and keep doing the same things forever and ever and ever and ever. And eventually somebody has to step up who's different, and they're going to do things differently. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about bus driving or anything. It's going to happen, isn't it? It's the process of life. And how do we respond to that? Do we encourage? Do we nitpick? Do we cheer and go, hey, it's not quite what I would like, but I'm going to be here and I'm going to cheer you on and I'm going to encourage you as much as I can because you're learning. Like, I'm pretty sure when Moses stepped away and some of these other people started doing these judgments, there would be people that would go, Moses wouldn't have said that. Moses wouldn't have done it that way. Anyway, where is Moses? Bring back Moses. We just need 800 more people on the petition. Like now. But to move forward, for Moses to be able to do what Moses had to do, other people had to step up and do things differently. And the bulk of the Israelites had to accept change and had to accept that that change was necessary for moving forward. Regardless of where we fit in all of that, we could be the ones that have to accept the change. We could be the ones that have to step up. We could be the one that has to get out of the way and let somebody else step in. Whatever it is, God's call is for us to do that well and to recognise that that is the natural part of life and what needs to take place. Moses takes the moment and instead of going, nope, I'm enjoying this, I'm going to stick on and keep doing this whether you like it or not. He hears the in-laws' loving advice, steps away, and they appoint 40 other people to do Moses' job. It demonstrates how well he was doing it, doesn't it? 40 people to replace one. And the Israelites are in a much better place, and Moses is freed to go and do the things that God had called him to do, to shape culture, to set the laws, to lead the people. I wonder, as we journey through life and we hit these different moments, and we all do in different ways, how good are we at allowing God to reshape our lives? How good are we at allowing God to question our motivations, to ask us, are we doing this because it strokes our ego? Are we doing it because it's important? Are we doing it because of the passion God has put in us? Or are we doing it because it just puts food on the table? As God comes and asks us the questions and asks us about the balance in our life, how good are we at listening? Let me pray. Father, I thank you so much for your love, your grace, your mercy. I thank you that you speak into our life through all the different phases, whether it's putting dreams and visions into our hearts, whether it's stirring little embers inside of us, whether it's challenging assumptions, challenging the way we'd go about things. You do this in a loving and a kind way because you want us to be our individual best that we can be. You want us to make the biggest impact that our life can make in the world around us. Father, I thank you for that. Help us to be open. Help us to hear when you want to speak to us. Help us to respond well and to make good decisions in following you. Father, bless your people. Use us to further your kingdom. I ask in Jesus' name.